This next segment is brought to you by Blue Cross and Blue Shield's National Labor Office. You know, Blue Cross and Blue Shield companies formed out of a need to provide affordable health care to teachers, to loggers, and miners. That was back in 1965, 60 years ago. That's when the Blues developed the National Labor Office to strengthen its commitment to organized labor. Well, today, Blue Cross and Blue Shield's National Labor Office remains focused on America's workers, advocating for affordable and equitable health care. Partnering with strategic alliances to provide industry-leading products and services, and proudly serving more than 18 million unionized workers, retirees, and their families, all working hard for America's working families and for the health of America. You can learn more by following them at Blue Labor on LinkedIn and X, formerly known as Twitter. Let's go to line number one and welcome a newcomer to the show. And this is part of our series here on Labor 131, the 131st anniversary of Labor Day. Labor Day, signed into law, 1894 by Grover Cleveland. LAWCHA.org is a website you want to go to, LAWCHA. What is that? That's the Labor and Working Class History Association. And what we're doing on the show is taking a deep dive into history to talk about various things that happen, strikes, work stoppages, labor law reform, you name it. All the things that happen to make things better for workers. And joining us is Carie Rael, who is an assistant professor in history at California State University, Long Beach. Before we get into some of the job actions here, talk to me a little bit about yourself. I see got your PhD in history from Rutgers University. We've had several professors on, very pro-labor. Let's put a lot. Yes. I don't know about the management over there. I know they had that conflict, but anyway, a lot of the professors definitely on workers' side. But talk to me a little bit more about your background. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Southern California in Anaheim. And I, was kind of local, got my degrees at the local state colleges here in California, Cal State Fullerton, and then went off to Rutgers, got my PhD in history. I got to study under some amazing, amazing professors, one of which, Dr. Murch, was one of the faculty who was intricately involved in the labor strike that just happened on campus. And I wanted to study what made the place I grew up, Orange County, so interesting and unique. And I had to travel across the country to figure out how to do that. And it was a great experience.
Good. You went from pretty much one coast to the other coast. That's cool. That's cool. Well, today we're going to concentrate on Disneyland. And we're going to go back to when Ronald Reagan was president. No friend of unions. Let's be honest about him, especially when he broke the strike by air traffic controllers. There was a coalition of 5 Disneyland unions in Anaheim, California. Talk to me about what happened back there, Carie.
Yeah. So, Disneyland was opened first in Anaheim, California in 1955. Walt Disney chose this location because he wanted to get away from what he called the brown haze of Los Angeles. You can infer the racially coded language from that.
Oh yeah.
So he picks an orange grove in the middle of Orange County and demolishes it, builds this new theme park that was supposed to be for white middle class Americans, free of racial strife, right? And this park, Disney had never been a friend to unions. In fact, I believe he was an informant for J. Edgar Hoover, was trying to break the animator strike prior to the creation of Disneyland. But because of that, unions had always fought hard to be represented for the workers in Disneyland. But they had never really joined together and gone on strike in a meaningful way until 1984, which is not necessarily something you think of because this is, a few years after Reagan has demolished the air traffic controller strike and the labor unions are kind of nationally like in this period of decline. But in Anaheim, around five unions at Disneyland, excuse me, who represented the custodians, the ticket sellers, the ride operators, the sales clerk, the warehouse workers, and even some of the hotel workers joined together, and around 2,000 workers launched the largest strike in Disneyland's history. And it really caught management by surprise. It caught the city by surprise. This is a period where Anaheim was starting to just completely turn into like a tourism economy. So what happened at Disneyland like reverberated not just throughout the city, but all of Orange County. Today, Disneyland is the largest employer in all of Orange County. And so when, this industry goes on strike, it doesn't just impact, the theme park, it impacts all the restaurants, the businesses around it, the shops, the hotels. Basically, the number one economy in Orange County comes to a halt. And so the fact that workers not only were able to launch the largest strike in the middle of, Reagan's run, but did so by joining forces with multiple unions represented at Disneyland, it really represented an opportune moment and like a turning point in the area's labor history.
So, Carie, I'm reading the strike lasted for about 22 days, and the negotiations obviously very, very tough.
Mm-hmm.
Did they come out okay as a result of those negotiations, or what, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think it's complicated. It wasn't a complete win in the sense that they got everything that they fought for. But they, for the first time, were able to get the Walt Disney Company to compromise in negotiations, which had never happened before. It was such a transactional, like, negotiation process that the unions were just kind of accepting whatever Disney offered, right? Disney wanted to originally cut wages by 16% and get rid of health care for part-time workers. And in the end, they cut wages for 8%, right? So they were able to like mitigate some of that wage loss. And they were able to save healthcare for, I think, the part-time workers. But I think the real win came from one, disrupting the image of Disney as this like benevolent workplace. It showed that, the powers that be in Anaheim and at Disney were not just going to face no opposition any longer. And this coalition of unions started to grow over time and really have become a powerhouse in Anaheim politics and Disneyland politics. So while they didn't necessarily win the contract they were looking for, it represented a new turning point where they were definitely, a force to be reckoned with in Orange County.
Carie, let me ask you, was that a little bit out of the norm? And I bring this up on the show so many times that it's important that people get engaged in the political process because elections matter. And it sounds to me that this was a learning process for some of the workers there because they realized that if we get politicians on their side, good things can happen. Is that what I'm hearing in this conversation?
Absolutely. I mean, literally all of the politicians were like bought and sponsored by Disney in Anaheim up until recently. So this process started in the 80s and they weren't able to get like politicians who were pro-labor until like the mid 2000s, right? But you can see that this strike in 84 was the beginning of that process.
So that's what happened in the mid 1980s. Let's fast forward to today. And it's funny we're having this conversation because I just saw a story on one of the networks about the 70th anniversary of Disneyland. It
Hmm.
started in 1955. And it's funny, I'm sure a lot of the historical perspectives don't talk about the job actions and the strikes that happen in order for workers to get a decent standard of living. And let's be honest, you need to make some serious money to work, especially in Southern California. I get it. Other than that, you have to live far away. And so you got a long commute time. So
Hmm.
fast forward, and I have to salute some of the unions. We'll talk more about that a little bit later. But if you take a look at what happened not too long ago, 2018, there was a measure on the ballot for the city of Anaheim, which
Hmm.
basically would raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. So, how did that pan out? I'm sure there was some opposition to that, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, just to even get to that point took so much organizing, right? Like the unions really shifted strategies by this period and had become like politically savvy, where they were organizing with local community groups. They were organizing with especially like Latino and immigrant groups in the area. And we're finding causes that, were shared amongst not just the workers, but the local residents in Anaheim, which, by the way, has like the second largest Latino population in Orange County, right? So it's a highly significant Latino population. And they were able to get this measure onto the ballot. It passes overwhelmingly, but the Walt Disney Company just refused to pay, saying that they weren't, that according to the measure, they didn't qualify to be required to pay minimum wage of $15 an hour. And so they basically went to court, and it is still not completely settled. But in March of 2025, a judge ruled in favor of the workers, saying that, not only does Disney have to pay the minimum wage according to Measure L, but they have to give 100% of back pay, overtime payments, and 10% interest on all of the back wages. And so it's looking like it's going to be a historic settlement in the next coming months for Disney workers and for all of Anaheim residents, because the measure didn't just apply to Disney, it applied citywide.
So that goes back to 2018. So
Yes.
basically, it took 7 years to bring it before a judge that ruled in their favor.
Yeah.
And we're talking, boy, 100% of their back wages. That's a chunk of money, no doubt about that. So, what I'm sensing in this conversation is Disney, not what you call a union friendly company. I
No.
have to ask you, and I know when they went to Florida and they got Disney World over there,
Hmm.
with what happened in California at Anaheim, was there any reasoning for that? Obviously, they're all over the world. Disney's all over the world
Right.
today. But I'm just wondering, you got California, which is very progressive, Florida, far from it. I mean, it used
Hmm.
to be. It used to be much more equal than it is now, but it's far to the right now. But I'm just wondering, did they have any conversations that you became aware of
Yes.
saying, you know what, maybe we got to get out of California or let's open up shop in a more business friendly state? Did that happen?
Absolutely. So, they basically, Florida happened because they wanted Anaheim to be a company town. They wanted Anaheim to function as a modern company town for Disney. And there were some roadblocks because of California laws and just the fact that there wasn't as much space. The real estate was extremely expensive. And so they weren't able to have complete control in Anaheim, even though they probably controlled around 80% of everything. They got 80% of everything they wanted. They didn't have 100% control. So Disney World was the solution to that. They bought all of this swampland. They made sure they had politicians on board ahead of time. And they basically created it with the expectation that it could continually expand and grow, which could not happen in Anaheim because Orange County had built up around it.
You mentioned a couple of the unions going back to the mid 80s,
Hmm.
1984 to be specific. And we should do a shout out here. I don't even know if they still have the same locals.
Yeah.
We're talking Teamsters Local 88, United Food and Commercial Workers Local 324,
Hmm.
Bakery and Confectionery Workers Local 66. You got the Hotel Employees, Restaurant Employees Local 681, and SEIU Local 399, which all walked out picketed at the gates there.
Yeah.
When you were doing your dive into labor history, how did that coalition come about? I mean, obviously they were ticked off. I get that, but when you get that many different unions together,
Yeah.
that's not an easy task. Let's be honest about that.
No.
Was that difficult in your studies on this?
I think that's what made this event so impactful, like a turning point, because I think unions had been facing severe obstacles nationwide, that they really saw this as an opportunity that if we want to make a difference, we have to join together despite our different working conditions, right? Like if the goal is to get what we want, then shutting down the tourism industry in Orange County is the way to do that. And when you have unions representing all these different workers, from the hotel workers to the ticket takers to the confectionery people, that this was a real opportunity to make a huge difference. And today there are over 27 unions now represented just by Disneyland in Anaheim.
Mm-hmm.
There are 27 different unions, so it has grown significantly. Yeah. And there's an even larger coalition. The coalition has gotten bigger over time.
One more question, and this pertains primarily to the hotel employees, restaurant employees, and how the demographics have changed.
Mm-hmm.
And you were seeing a lot of immigrants and probably some undocumented workers that have been involved working
Mm-hmm.
in Southern California. And now we got the ICE raids. And I'm just wondering if you're monitoring that. That might be something of a next post for you, I would assume.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as the hotel workers started in the 90s, started to realize that there was some basically worker-led changes within the hotel workers where they said, look, like all of the leadership doesn't look like us within the union. We have a huge immigrant Latina worker base, and yet there were no or rarely any Latinos represented in union membership. And so you saw a real push, especially after Reagan's amnesty program in 1986, for the union to try to embrace its immigrant workforce, try to get new leadership at the helm of the hotel workers, and really, in doing so, broadened and strengthened the base. I think through these changes, they gained over 5,000 more members, and were able to join forces with another union and become Unite Here Local 11, which was huge, right? Like they saw that by embracing their immigrant workforce, helping them gain pathways to citizenship through the amnesty program, that this was a real way to organize the worker base. And, there are some tragic stories of infighting with some of the older white members choosing to leave the union over this fight. But even with that infighting and some of the workers leaving the union, the Unite Here Local 11 gained over 5,000 members. And so I see this as a lesson for, what it means to change with the times and try to find class and worker solidarity and overlook issues of differences like citizenship status and race, and realize that the employers love it when there's fighting, especially around racial lines or lines of citizenship status. And I hope this is a lesson that we learn from and realize that we're stronger together, especially as our immigrant neighbors and coworkers are being targeted by ICE. Yeah, I think this is something really important to be paying attention to.
Reagan was not what you call about unions. I mentioned what happened with the air traffic controllers, but he would be kicked out of the party today for what he did back in 1986 when it comes to amnesty. He really would. I mean, he was all about immigrants. He wanted the diversity in labor. There was no question about that.
Yeah.
Well, Carie, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation. Carie Rael, who is assistant professor in history at California State University, Long Beach. And she's also a member of LACHA, which is the Labor and Working Class History Association. A number of professors all pretty much geeked up on labor history. I love it. I can talk about this all the time. Wonderful conversation. Thank you so much. Stay safe out there, okay?
All right. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure being here.